Pocatello High School's Erie residence. Pocatello is a quiet city in southern Idaho, best known by the outside world for having its flag voted the worst flag in North America. However, paranormal enthusiasts know the city for the haunted Pocatello High School. Constructed in 1892, the school has a long history and rumors of violence and foul play during its existence. The most infamous incident at the school was when two students, Brian Draper and Tori Adam Kick, murdered their classmate Cassie Jo Studdard. The high school itself is said to be home to several ghosts, with students witnessing strange apparitions, and security footage capturing several entities after the doors are locked. It is not officially known who these spirits are, but there are stories of students committing suicide during school hours in the mid-20th century. The school even burned down in 1914, but people are still searching for answers in hopes of helping the spirits come to rest. The untimely death of Domenick Gallegos. Children in elementary love to be physically active and long for recess and gym. Sadly, it can lead to unforeseen consequences. Domenick Gallegos was outside during gym class playing soccer when he collided with another kid. While everyone expected him to brush it off and get back up, other children reported he was not getting up and was unconscious. Gallegos was rushed to a hospital, where he was unfortunately pronounced dead. Police came to the hospital, but it was determined there were no signs of foul play and his death was caused by a freak accident. The school staff and students were devastated. It was later determined when Gallegos had fallen, another student had stomped on his chest twice, at which point he fell unconscious. The boy who did so was known to have bullied Gallegos countless times in the past, and Gallegos' family sought some sort of justice for their son. However, an autopsy revealed Gallegos had an undiagnosed enlarged heart, and no further trauma was found to his body. It was officially determined to be a freak accident from an undiagnosed medical condition, and no one was held accountable for Gallegos' untimely passing. The Watcher in the Ceiling. A former student of Westland High School in Oregon had a truly scary experience to recall on Reddit of a close encounter with a ghost. During his freshman year, the student known as Jack asked to use the restroom during class and made his way down the hall. While walking, he felt a cold breeze move past him, and his hair began to stand on end. He ignored the feeling and entered the restroom. As he was sitting in one of the stalls, he heard a knock on the stall door. He said it was occupied, but there was no answer. As he was about to brush it off again, he realized no one was in the bathroom, as he had not heard the doors open or seen feet in front of the stall. He then heard bumps coming from the ceiling and looked up, where a large hole was above him. To his horror, he saw a figure staring down at him emotionless. Despite shaking with fear, he managed to snap a photo before running to the nearby janitor's office. He said there was someone in the ceiling and showed them the photo. Police were called to search the building, but they found nobody there. Jack's photo is enough to give viewers chills of their own, as the figure appears to have no facial features except for the outline of a nose, ears, and where eyes should be. Apart from that, it is completely white but still looks menacing. No updates from Jack have appeared since, and it is unknown if the figure was an actual person or a spirit long forgotten.
The Steubenville tragedy. By far one of the most notorious and well-known occurrences on this list, Steubenville is located in eastern Ohio. Residents, as well as the entire country, were rocked by a horrific crime in August of 2012. In the late hours of the 11th, a local high school girl, who has not been identified, was intoxicated while several of her peers sexually assaulted her. Several of the participants documented their acts through photos and videos taken from their cell phones and later bragged about the acts on social media. However, two of the prime suspects, Trent Mays and Malik Richmond, who were the star football players on the school team, orchestrated a cover-up in an attempt to get away with it. But by then, word had spread. Ohio authorities obtained evidence from cell phones of those present and hundreds of texts between students discussing what had happened. The victim stated she had no memory of the events, but awoke in a basement completely naked, surrounded by Mays, Richmond, and another boy. Mays and Richmond were arrested and charged with sexual assault, and both received a 1-year sentence. Mays was released in January of 2015, while Richmond was released 1 year previously. The case has caused much outcry against rape culture, and many have said the boys' punishment was far too light. When sentenced, the boys cried, saying nobody would want them anymore, but the public didn't seem to have much sympathy.
Canada's residential schools. When it comes to the dark shadows on a nation's history, there are usually enough to fill volumes of books. In Canada, the residential schools have painted a bloody history on Canada's relations with its First Nations communities. Known officially as the Canadian Indian Residential Schools, these institutions were administered by various Christian churches throughout Canada. Their objectives was to remove members of the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis and assimilate them into Canadian society. Throughout Canadian history, roughly 30% of Native children were forced to attend residential schools and were subjected to appalling treatment. Students were forced to speak English, participate in Christian prayers, and various menial tasks such as cleaning the halls. If they refused or made mistakes, they would be punished by whipping and sometimes isolation for long periods of time. The students lived on campus in overcrowded dorms that were not properly heated and had poor sanitation. Many did not survive their stays, and the majority who did survive suffered severe psychological issues after, leading to alcoholism and even suicide. Sexual abuse was also highly present within the schools by staff. More shocking is the last residential school closed in 1996, over 100 years after they opened and decades after the conditions were discovered, albeit the conditions were dramatically improved by then. Today, the Canadian government has made efforts to reconcile with the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis communities, with the Truth and Reconciliation Committee actively working with the different bands. In June 2008, then Prime Minister Stephen Harper issued a formal apology on behalf of the Canadian government, and since then the government is working to help improve the quality of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, although it still meets with controversy to this. The Martinsville satanic sex scandal. During the 1980s and 90s, a moral panic swept across the United States with hundreds of cases of alleged sexual abuse in daycares. Many were said to be part of satanic rituals, and soon various communities were finding themselves engulfed in a mass investigation and panic. The small town of Martinsville, Saskatchewan, Canada had one of its own. In 1992, a mother alleged her child had been sexually abused by a local woman who ran a daycare center. As police began an investigation, reports flooded the station with claims of sexual abuse by a satanic cult known as the Brotherhood of the Ram. Soon, dozens of people, including 5 police officers of 3 different detachments, were facing over 100 charges of child molestation and sexual abuse. However, many of these charges were dropped after evidence proved the events had not taken place, but one individual was charged with molestation, albeit not to the same extent of the original charges. After the local detachment became overwhelmed with the cases, an RCMP task force took over the investigation and concluded it was nothing more than mass hysteria, and investigators had mishandled the investigation with leading questions to the witnesses and praising children for giving incriminating answers. The couple who were initially accused of the abuse received a $924,000 settlement in 2004 for emotional and personal damages as a result of the claims. It goes to show just how much a rumor can spread and the drastic effect it can have on the lives of people.
Virginia Tech's second tragedy. The moment someone mentions Virginia Tech, we almost always remember the tragic April day when a gunman killed 32 students before turning the gun on himself. To this day, it remains the worst school shooting in American history. Sadly, this wasn't the end of Virginia Tech's string of tragedies. Chinese student Xin Yang arrived to begin her studies and reached out to fellow Chinese as she was alone in the country. She attended events and social gatherings with various other international students and quickly found people she considered friends. In January 2009, she befriended 25-year-old Haiyang Zhu, but this would prove to be fatal. In a shocking and horrific act, Zhu beheaded Yang with a kitchen knife in a campus coffee shop before a crowd of stunned onlookers. His motives remain unknown, as witnesses say they appeared to be smiling, and no argument had taken place between them prior to the event. People who know Zhu described him as charming and kind, which leaves even more questions unanswered. Zhu was taken into custody within minutes of the murder, and he was charged with first-degree murder. As if things couldn't possibly get worse, just under 3 years later, gunshots once again rang out on the campus, and police found 2 dead in a parking lot. An officer had made a routine stop when he was shot several times and killed. An investigation later revealed the second body belonged to the shooter, and he had shot himself. Virginia Tech has remained strong through these strings of bad luck, and the campus appears to have been pulled closer together as a community.